coming to get you, Barbara. They're coming for you, Barbara. Look, there comes one of them now.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Movie Breakdown. And this is going to be a little bit different than your typical episode of the Movie Breakdown. As I warned you in our previous episode, this is going to be a cut and paste job. As I have not been hiding, I have been an emotional mess this year, and that has meant that even though we've recorded some episodes, I've never got around to the energy of editing them and posting them. And so here we are, where you've not got weekly podcasts, the site has not had weekly movie reviews, but we've gone over that many times. But we're trying to catch up, we're trying to make good, we're trying to make this the summer of movie reviews, the summer of the movie breakdown, the summer that Beyond the Balcony rocks. And how we're going to do that is try to get some of these episodes posted, or at least parts of them. And so today we have several movie reviews over the last few months that have never been heard by you wonderful listeners. And so I'm going to be taking two episodes and doing a little bit of a review from this episode, or review from this episode. And so you will be hearing from me, Christopher Spicer, and you will be hearing from Scott Martin, this sort of collection of movie reviews that will include some great releases that we just have not been discussed yet, including the Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt starring action romantic comedy The Fall Guy. We've also got the big ape blockbuster in the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and we'll be discussing so much more as well. So like I said, I'm Christopher Spicer. Enjoy this podcast with me and the wonderful Scott Martin. Summer movies this season, and that is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And I've always been a big Planet of the Apes fan. I watched the original movie very young as a kid because my dad was a big fan of it, and I saw the whole series of them. And then I remember watching the Planet of the Apes TV series. And then they did the reboots, the latest trilogy that came together. Rise of the Planet of the Apes was one that we saw before we were podcasting. And then we, of course, reviewed Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War of the Planet of the Apes. And I was a big fan of that trilogy. I thought it got progressively better with each one. And I thought it was a great story of sort of the rise of Caesar and the fall of man and their hubris, how it outdid them, and how Caesar was attempting to unite the apes, and sort of the friction he had to go through, and Caesar becoming sort of this deity type figure, but him himself sort of having his own personal challenges he had to go through. I thought it was a great trilogy. I thought it ended in a great way. I didn't think there's really any reason to return to it. But here we are with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And it's pretty clear after watching this movie that they're planning on doing, I guess, what you call a sequel trilogy. This looks like they are gearing up to do a whole new set of trilogies. And you can consider me all in because I loved this one. I thought this was a fantastic picture. And what we have here is at the very beginning of the picture, you sort of see Caesar again, and you see where, kind of spoiler for those who haven't seen the trilogy, Caesar has now passed away. But it's this idea that the apes are now united. They now rule the earth. And that's how the picture starts. And then we go many decades later, many generations ahead. So Caesar now is long passed away. Apes are very much now in control of the earth. Humans now are considered sort of second class. They are these animals that don't even really speak anymore type thing. And so we're at this stage. And what I thought was fascinating about this picture and what it sort of looks at
modern society is you have someone like Caesar, and he's now sort of this Jesus Christ-like figure, right? He is this almost religious type figure because he's the one who led the apes to prosperity. He's led the apes to be these great the rulers of the earth type thing. But what's fascinating here is how his name and his kind of teachings have been distorted. And what Caesar was attempting to do, he failed in the end because we now have ape factions. The apes are all separated. They're not united anymore. There's different groups. There's an ape group we learned about that is more set on nature. And they are connected with the eagles. And they go through this ritual where you have to get an eagle egg and bring it back to the tribe. And then you then become sort of a higher member within the group. And then you have a more warlike tribe. And the eagle group, they don't even know Caesar. Like our main character, he's not even aware of Caesar's teachings. They've gone that kind of far away. And then this other warlike group, they use Caesar's name a lot, but they use it as a way to sort of justify their domination of the other apes. And they've distorted what Caesar was trying to see. And then we eventually find another character, orangutan, Raka, who he sort of is kind of like a monk-like character. That idea that he's keeping the teachings of Caesar sacred, and he knows that Caesar was going for peace and he wanted things being united, and he's aware that things aren't the way that they should be. And so I think it's the great thing about the ape movies is even though it's apes that are up there, it has always been talking about our society. It's always been talking about things like religion and science and dogma and the idea of how we distort values to push certain agendas. And I thought this picture did a great job of exploring those ideas. And I really thought it was fascinating of how they use Caesar as this figure that everyone kind of interprets it different. Caesar said his things. They are set, but people interpreted them differently. They distorted them. And I like seeing kind of, because we never really saw this in the original ape movies where there was different ape tribes battling against each other. And so I thought that part of like the various clans was really cool here. Our lead character is from that eagle tribe I was talking about. His name is Noah, and he is acted by Owen Teague, and he's sort of a chimpanzee hunter. And early on in the picture, he gets separated from his family when the other sort of group I was talking about, the apes that are led by Proximus Caesar, who is played by Kevin Durant. His clan of apes basically murder his village, capture his mother, capture his friends. And so Noah now is on his own to try to save them. And along the way, he comes across a human, something he's never seen before. This human is played by Freya Allen, and she is Nova. And just because that's what they give every human character is Nova. She eventually gets another name too, but she starts as sort of Nova. And he goes on this journey with her, meets Raka, and they are trying to sort of get to that land to sort of rescue his. He's trying to rescue his tribe that's been taken, but at the same time, he's also trying to protect Noah. Raka says Noah is a more intelligent human. There's something about her. What we've been taught about humans aren't totally true. They may be smarter than we think. You need to protect Nova. And Nova also has a secret, which also I'm not going to spoil in a review. You have to watch the movie to find out the different things that she has. But I think the reveals here are fairly satisfying. The direction that they go. William H. Macy plays a human character who is very intriguing and ends up being very different than sort of the Nova character. I like I said, the ideas are exploring here, but it never becomes didactic. This is big blockbuster filmmaking I like. Me and Scott have ranted about CGI for years. And I've also talked about the fact that a lot of the CGI, I think, comes from the fact that studios are overworking their CGI people. They're rushing them. And so I am never going to criticize the CGI artists, the special effects artists. To me, it's always going to be the pressure above that they're not giving them the time. Or sometimes they're trying to work on the CGI while the scripts are still being written and that type of stuff. or using CGI when you didn't need it. I think here the special effects are absolutely amazing. There is so many movies where you could tell when a big creature is CGI. The apes here are believable. They're all CGI'd, obviously. It's in the motion capture suits. And just incredible. The facials, the visuals, the emotions that come off every single one of these apes. These apes are believable. And the actors bring life to them through the voice work they're doing here. I'm sure their facials probably help with the CGI type stuff as well. It is just so enthralling watching the work, but at the same time, the set designs here are great. I'm not sure what stuff was on location and what stuff was done in a studio. Obviously, some of it was very much for sure done in a studio, and this is kind of that Jungle Book level stuff we talked about a few years ago with that Disney remake. All the jungles look real. You get to, what's really cool on their travels is you get to see former human civilizations, former big cities that, because it's now been like generations since they actually existed, you get to see the moss and the overgrowth, and you get to see something that just looks like sort of a grassy mountain. You realize, oh, that's like a skyscraper. And all that stuff, it was fascinating to watch. I mean, to me, Dune is still the best movie of the year for soaking up visuals, but this challenges it. It's really close. There is some great visual design here, great imagination. And it kept me enthralled all the way through because there was great visual stuff here. And as well, the action sequences are intense and well done. The cameraman's not joining in, jumping all over the place. It's not the shaky cam stuff. My old eyes can follow the action. It's intense. There's some creative stuff that they do in some of those fight sequences. They build to a big, intense finale, which is exciting. And as I said before, there's some fun twists here. You've got great performances. Freya Allen as Nova does a great job as sort of this human that doesn't initially trust the apes, but eventually realizes that she has to. And this idea that she slowly becomes more confident. And Kevin Durant is great as sort of our villain here. Peter McCann is very funny as Raka. He's sort of like an Obi-Wan character, but also a Yoda. So there's some humor in his character as well. And so he's fantastic. Across the board, you've got people who really bring emotion. And they know the times where you've got to sort of be over the top, but the times where you really want to have those grounded moments as well. Sort of a post-credit scene here. There is definitely some big hints towards sequels, like I said, and trilogy, and I'm all in. I thought this was a fascinating world. This was a fantastic tentpole. It's not the best of the year because, again, Dune still stands as my favorite kind of big event movie of the year. But this was really close, very satisfying, and I'm totally excited to get back to the Planet of the Apes again and watch some more. This is 3.5 stars.
In Unfrosted. This is a Netflix show. Or Netflix movie. This is written and directed by Jerry Seinfeld. I have a feeling you're going to hate me on this one, Chris. I have a feeling you're going to hate me. I liked this film. Why did I like it? Okay, here's the thing. So it's silly. This is a very, very silly movie, and it is absolutely ridiculous. But I accept that. I accept the premise because what the movie starts off with is this little kid, George, played by Isaac Bay, gonna run away, and he goes into a diner, sits at the counter, and asks for Pop-Tarts. The guy beside him, an adult, Bob Cabana, played by Jerry Seinfeld, sees this kid, sees that he's gonna run away, and then decides to tell him a story. The kid's got Pop-Tarts in his hand, and so he decides to tell him, I'm gonna tell him the story about how Pop-Tarts were created. And as someone who loves to tell stories, if I see someone pick something up, I'm always like, and I need to kill time. Yeah, do you know about this? And then you just go into a story based off of what the person has or anything like that. So I completely buy the premise. I buy all the silliness, all the rigmarole, as this is what a guy is telling a kid who's going to run or who's thinking of running away. And he's just keeping the kid entertained, keeping the kid Is this movie perfect? No. There's a lot of stuff in this film that maybe doesn't hit as well. This is the story of Kellogg's versus Post. I kind of feel that you need to get a lot of the jokes, you need to have an understanding of the Kellogg's and Post cereal brands and the mascots that they had. Otherwise, I think a lot of this could be missed. I'm not saying that this is deep, clever, intellectual jokes, but I will say that I did laugh out loud at times. Like there's a funeral, and the way the funeral proceeded, someone in the dying in the cereal industry, I accepted how the funeral went, and someone cutting up bananas, slicing bananas over the grave, I thought was fun. I like the idea that this chase for something other than cereal for breakfast, the Kellogg's and Post going for this pastry, and how that the milkmen would be just this mafia of milkmen are against it because milk was just. Did you know that milk was something that was just harmlessly squirted at each other with like playful, fun glee until someone squirted it in a bowl of cereal and it became like a purposeful beverage? There's a lot of silliness here, but I liked how it went. I liked how there's a lot of cameos. I liked how they play their characters. Bill Burr as JFK. I enjoyed it. Intellectually, is there anything curious about this film? No. It is silly humor. It's got a Rotten Tomato score of like 47%. I completely understand why it would have that. However, I think I was charmed by its silliness. I accepted its silliness. I liked the fact that there's this almost like a space race between Kellogg's and Post to crack this milkless breakfast product. I love the idea of naming it and how off some of the names were, like the dextrose dillies. And Walter Cronkite. Gotta say, I loved Walter Cronkite in this. I thought he was a fun character. If you're looking for a story that will suck you in, if that's the kind of movie you need, Unfrosted is not for you. This is not a narrative-driven story. If you're looking for something like my 3-star rating comes from, it's a rainy Sunday afternoon, life's got some stresses, you need to evaporate. But just remember, tricks are for kids, not adults. So, I made a cereal joke. You didn't even respond, you goof. Chris, sell my jokes. Thank you. The Cuban Missile Crisis, it turns out it was actually about sugar, and it wasn't about nuclear weapons. There's aspects in here that I think were actually kind of fun. So I give it 3 stars. I'm ready to be just completely trotted on by Chris over this one. But remember, there's an asterisk beside this 3 stars.
So if it is a rainy Sunday afternoon and you are on the dumps and you're sad and you decide to put on Frosted and watch it, what you're then going to do is take out your toaster, put in your Pop-Tarts, and then stick in your knife as well, so that you can really just make the day even worse. You are correct, my good friend. We completely saw a different movie here.
No.
Man, okay, we saw the same movie. I watched it properly. I realized this was just a horrible, unfunny picture.
No.
Oh yes. I think your review and your describing of this movie was way more hilarious than anything I saw with execution on the screen. I think that's the problem. Is this movie stacked? Oh yeah. Does this movie have funny people? Oh yeah. Funny in other movies. But like, am I excited that we got Bill Burr and Jerry Seinfeld and Melissa McCarthy and Amy Schumer and Jim Gaffigan and Christian Slater as a milkman and Hugh Grant. Yeah, bring them all on. This is going to be terrific. No. It's going to be painful, and I'm looking for my toaster. I'm looking for my knife to try to end this thing. I think one of the problems is Jerry Seinfeld. We love the Seinfeld series. But even while you're watching the Seinfeld series, Jerry Seinfeld's not really an actor. That was always obvious. He's a funny man, but not really an actor. Here, he decides to be the star and the director. And so I walked away saying, Jerry Seinfeld's not really an actor, and he's not really a director. Because I thought there was funny sequences here, but it wasn't directed very well. It was one of these things, for me at least, I was like, this should have been funny, but the way it was directed, the way it was paced, it fell flat. And I thought this movie also never really figured out what it wanted to be. Did it want to be sort of a humorous take on a historical event? Like, it does have some facts in here. Like, Post did make country squares. That was a real thing. And then it ended up flopping because that name's horrible and Pop-Tarts is a much better name. Kids don't want to eat country squares. They don't want to be a square, but you sure want to be a Pop-Tart. But it has those little bits, but it doesn't really have a lot of historical facts. And then, is it going to be a Mel Brooks style over-the-top parody? And I thought it didn't lead into that enough. I thought it had the ideas, but it didn't have the energy, the pizzazz, the timing, that slapstick that makes a Blazing Saddles or a Young Frankenstein pop or an Airplane. It didn't have that gag a minute to it. It felt very slow and stuck in molasses to get to each of the numbers. And it didn't quite really let the actors, these comedians, shine into their skill. And so, like you mentioned, these things like the milkman cabal, that's a funny idea. I just didn't think it really got explored enough. And then like things like the Hugh Grant character, those are jokes that have been in like so many movies. Like the whole disgruntled guy that he's actually wants to be a Shakespearean actor. Like that was in Galaxy Quest. Like I've seen this so many times. It's like, what are you going to do different here to actually make it funny? So for me, I was stuck with what I thought, but clearly not Scott, and that's great. I'm always happy when you're a happy boy. This was a slog. This is 1.5 stars, sir.
Galaxy Quest. Yeah, it's a good film.
Much better movie. A funny movie.
I love, like, if you're looking for a really good rainy Sunday afternoon movie,
yes,
Galaxy Quest is one of the best. Like, that is one of the best movies for that situation. However, Unfrosted's not horrible. Chris would have you believe that this is just a terrible, terrible film.
Yes, I would.
I happen to disagree. I think that you bring up some good points about the directing. I don't think the directing's that great. As far as historical events, this is just a guy making crap up to stall a kid. And so I love the fact that everything is just so over the top, and there's just so many behind the scenes things that I could see a quirky storyteller adding to this story that were in this film. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, and I get that, but I feel like the way you're framing it didn't quite go, like how it's executed wasn't as good as how you're framing it, I feel like. Because I feel there was times where they were trying to put historical accuracy, and then when they went over the top, I felt they didn't necessarily go fanciful enough. Or they would do things that like were supposedly historical accurate, but is biopic accurate. And it wasn't quite even how things were. So it's like, well, why did he even bother putting that in? And so I just thought it was kind of jarring. And the fact that they were trying to do a bit of like, be a little bit of a telling how things were, and then also be silly. I just thought it really jarred the pacing. It just even how like some characters were like historically accurate, real characters, some were fake. It was a weird mismatch that for me just made the story feel very inconsistent. And I am looking forward to Jerry Seinfeld maybe going back into stand-up so he never tries to direct again.
Not fanciful enough for you. There's a scene where sea monkeys are put inside ravioli. It becomes a sentient life, and then becomes a teenager that is fathered by Chef Boyardee and Harold von Brunnet. And so, not fanciful enough for you, sir. I would like to understand your thoughts on the teenage ravioli.
I think it could have been funnier.
I didn't say it was funny. I didn't say it was funny. I said fanciful.
Okay, let me then rephrase. Execute the fancifulness in a good way.
Okay, that I can understand.
Because again, the ideas you keep on saying are fantastic and they're accurate. I just didn't think they were executed well on the screen. But the things you're enjoying, I totally want to enjoy those too.
I can agree that I disagree with Chris.
Which is always fun.
3 stars from Scott for Unfrosted and 1.5 from Chris for Unfrosted.
I did want to mention one little thing that I thought was funny about Unfrosted is when they're trying to come up with the name for it, and they eventually arrive at Pop-Tarts, they initially didn't want to do it because they thought the name was too close to pop art with what Andy Warhol did. Apparently, though, historically, that's exactly the reason they picked the name Pop-Tart, because Andy Warhol was big at the time. They picked Pop-Tart because they wanted that connection to something that was trendy. So I just thought that's a fun anecdote. That's actually why they picked the name.
And if you're thinking, I would always love to see Dan Levy play Andy Warhol for like 5 seconds on screen, then you got to watch Unfrosted to have that dream come true. Knock it off your bucket list.
Way more enjoyable than Unfrosted as far as I'm concerned. And so far, you count Kingdom Planet of the Apes, which I already praised. We are looking, if this is sort of what is setting the tone for the summer blockbuster season, we're off to a great start when it comes to quality. We'll talk about box office later, but when it comes to quality, we're off to a fantastic start because Kingdom of the Planet Ape was great. But just a week prior, I saw a movie where I thought, well, this is going to be the best summer movie for sure. And then it kind of got challenged by Kingdom. But that's The Fall Guy. The Fall Guy delivers everything that a summer blockbuster of the 1980s used to deliver. The things that you were expecting for escapist entertainment, The Fall Guy delivers it in spades. This is just such a fun time at the movie theater, with sort of the biggest criticism being it's probably a bit longer than it should be. So if you have any signs of it being kind of the modern era, everything apparently has to be over 2 hours now. And this one definitely did not need to be over 2 hours, but it is still an absolute blast. We've got David Lynch here as the director, former stuntman, who's given us some great kind of action pictures in the last few years. He was uncredited when it came to sort of John Wick, and there's Deadpool, and he's done some other pictures, Bullet Train, and now he's delivering Fall Guy, proving that if you want action movies, this guy knows how to do it, especially if you want action movies mixed in with comedy. And now, if you also want to mix it into romance, because this is really a romantic comedy with amazing action sequences. And you've got yourself a killer cast in the lead role here, Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. And I should mention, The Fall Guy is based off a Lee Majors starring TV series in the 1980s that I never watched. But basically the similarities between those two things is the fact that the lead character is a stuntman. That's really it. They weren't really too much trying to redo the picture or redo the TV series. It's not like a full-on adaptation. But I think the things that people liked about Fall Guy, if you like the TV series, I think this will still deliver the things that you liked about that series, you will like in this movie. But if you've never even heard about the TV series, you will just love this movie as an original movie. I've talked to several people who thought this was an 100% original movie, not based off anything. And I'm like, well, go for it. Keep on believing that, because it really kind of is. Although they kind of sharing a name and sharing that the lead is a stunt person. But where it does capture Fall Guy, like I said, is this feels like a 1980s movie. This is the stuff that we loved about the 1980s. It's got some fun comedy in here. It's got star power. It's got leads that are really leading on their charisma. It's got fun action sequences. It's got big eye-popping stunts. And it has all those things that we kind of loved about the 80s, that kind of excess type stuff that went in there with some incredibly fun performances here. Ryan Gosling, to me, has become probably just once. I've always loved Nicolas Cage, and so he's right up there with Nicolas Cage as one of my, I think, favorite actors now. Ryan Gosling, he's just so charismatic, and he can do it all. Like, he can bring drama, he can bring comedy, as he proved in like Nice Guys and Barbie. He's a believable action star. He apparently he did some of the stunts in this as well. Not all of them. They did have stuntmen, but you buy him as sort of the hero here, and he's absolutely fantastic. And then Emily Blunt's the same thing, where this is a lady who is willing to sort of provide humor, but she also is someone who kind of is a believable character, and I think the two, when they're on the screen together, you believe it. The romance matters here. It's not throwaway. You want these two crazy kids to get together. You love them together. They feel natural. They feel like they're actually in a relationship. They've got that banter, and I think all that stuff is fantastic. And what happens is at the beginning of the movie, Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling's character, so Colt Seavers and Jody Marino, they are dating, and she's sort of part of the crew. He's the stunt man, and then a stunt goes bad. And then we find out, I think it's 18 months later, that he got injured. He thought his career was done, and he has basically stopped. He basically ghosted Jody's character, Emily Blunt's character, Jody. He ghosted Jody. He basically cut things off with their relationship for 18 months. Though he still holds a flame for her, he still loves her. And then he gets a phone call from an agent and basically says that we need you to track down our lead star. It's played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, Tom Ryder, who does an amazing job as an egotistical kind of blowhard actor, someone who is high on himself, thinks he's great, thinks he could do his own stunts, just this crazy actor. Aaron Taylor Johnson proves that he can have some charisma and be a fun character, that he doesn't deserve to be lopped into the Charlie Hunnam group. I mean, he was also fun in Bullet Train too, so he's definitely showing himself here, and he's a lot of fun in this kind of role that he has. And so Ryan Gosling agrees to essentially go in, be a stunt person. They need him to be a stunt person for his upcoming space epic. But while he's being a stunt person, he's also asking to kind of track down the lead actor. And it just so happens the person who's directing this big sci-fi epic is Emily Blunt, the person that he ghosted 18 months ago and he still loves. And so the movie is part kind of noir, where he's trying to uncover and figure out what happened to this actor, while at the same time trying to win back Jodie because he still loves her. And what I love about Ryan Gosling is, unlike some lead stars, he's not scared of looking vulnerable. He's an action star, but he's not scared of looking a bit dorky. I mean, there's a scene where he's crying to a Taylor Swift song because he's not sure if he can get Jodie back. And it's funny, but I also like that there is this vulnerability he shows, that he is willing to say, I miss her and I need her and I really love her. And I think that's something where often action stars, the girl's just a trophy, but this is someone who matters to him. And I think that really added kind of depth and heart to this movie and made it where you loved when these two were together. The fact that Ryan Gosling is not scared to look a little dorky and broken. And so it makes him a very relatable character. And so then the noir sequences, his investigative sequences, lead to some fun action sequences. This is also directed by a guy who used to be a stuntman, and you've got some incredible stunt work. There is one part where you've got the car that is rolling, that is absolutely incredible because it's an actual kind of car roll. You've got another big jump that's done here. There is some big, like the end sequence has some great stunt work here. At the end of the picture, there is an end credit scene, but there also, which is really funny and we're staying for. But before that sort of post credit scene, there is a bunch of shots of how they did the stunts and showing sort of the behind the scenes stuff to really show you that this is an old school picture with some great stunt work here. You're here for the action. There is some twisted turns in this movie, kind of a mystery, and I thought that was the weakest part of the movie. I think it's one of those things where you kind of sort of can figure it out. What it kind of builds to maybe isn't as satisfying. There's a bit of a, oh, that's it? This is what they're doing? But it's still okay because, again, you're with Colt Seaver. You're with Ryan Gosling for most of the movie, and he's really enjoyable. And Winston Duke, so we've praised on this podcast lots. He is fantastic as sort of the friend to Ryan Gosling, and he's got some great moments to shine. He offers some humor, but also feels like a relatable and good friend here. And so you've got a fantastic cast with some nice action set pieces sprinkled throughout this picture with a romance that actually matters. I mean, if you want to see kind of one of the best romantic comedies of the last few years, this is right up there. And so kind of like under the kind of Lost City vein where it's romantic comedy with some big action in here too. It's a really super fun movie. I give it 3.5 stars.
Scoop is a much more interesting, deliberate film that is a dramatic story based off of real life events, and this focuses on the interview that happened between Prince Andrew and Emily Maitlis after sort of the scandal about Prince Andrew's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein became too much, and he needed to do something about the story because it was completely out of hand. Of course, the real story that came out of this was, why did he do this interview? That was more the discussion in real life. After the interview, people were just asking, like, why? Why did he do this? Because Prince Andrew did not perform well during the interview with Emily Maitlis. The story wasn't the Prince reacts. The story was the Prince did an interview, and here's what happened. It turned into one of the most ill-conceived PR maneuvers done by someone in recent history. An hour-long interview where you just have this sense of why. I haven't seen the full interview. I've seen clips. And boy, oh boy, were there news stories aplenty to read about it after the interview. The interview was the news story for weeks. I mean, weeks. Am I wrong, Chris?
Oh, yeah. It was top headline stuff for, I would say, months.
Yeah. This was not a good move by Prince Andrew. So the movie Scoop tries to look at the behind-the-scenes take on how this interview came about. We have Billie Piper playing producer, Sam McAllister. She works for Newsnight. Gillian Anderson, who people may recognize from a little sci-fi show that came out a while ago called The X-Files. She plays Emily Maitlis. Really good performance there. Like, really, really good. I think Billie Piper was great as well. I think the acting here is incredible. Rufus Sewell as Prince Andrew does a great job. The thing is, outside of the acting, the movie does struggle a little bit, I think, with its overall look. And this just comes down to my interpretation of how it was supposed to come across, is that there's someone who works for Prince Andrew. It was Kate Fleetwood's character, correct, Chris?
Yes.
Yes. Annette Witheridge, played by Kate Fleetwood. And it felt like the movie was her story along with the story of Sam McAllister. They're both trying to tell the story. And it came across as very, very unbalanced, if that was the case. If that was the take, that this is two people trying to get just put the news out for people to perceive, it kind of felt imbalanced, because the movie is definitely, like, it definitely wants you to make you think that Prince Andrew's a boob. It's got this one scene in it before the interview where he's obsessed with his stuffed animals, and it just feels like it's already dictating what you're supposed to think about the character instead of letting the story, the build up, and the interview inform your decision. I mean, ultimately, no one walked away from that interview and thought, "Well, he's not a boob." It's just I think the movie would have been better served if like the public, we the viewer were left to discover for ourselves through the interview, and it never felt like the movie was truly doing that. I'd say that for myself and my interpretation on what it was trying to be, that would be the biggest failing of the film. Outside of that, I mean, we have to understand that it is a work of fiction. It is based around a real life interview that happened, but almost everything happening here is behind the scenes. We have to accept that a lot of this is going to be completely fictionalized. Some of it may be off of, known fact, but how people are, character development, I felt like the character of Sam McAllister was almost a little cliched for the fact of like, let's have a character with certain aspects of her life, driving for this story for success. I didn't feel it was necessary. I think that the story itself that it was telling was riveting enough that you didn't need to dive down that route. But this is one of those movies that I would say don't watch for anything other than entertainment. Don't watch this to get a better understanding of historical fact. You can just watch the interview that happened between Prince Andrew and Emily Maitlis. That's easy enough to do. Watch this for entertainment. Don't watch it for fact. I give it 3 stars, but the main thing is, as long as people understand this is not about anything other than entertainment.
I'm in complete agreement with you on this one. This is not a unfrosted situation. You got this one right, Scott.
Oh yeah.
And and the big thing I think here is you're doing an investigative reporting picture, but you're putting it up against All the President's Men and Spotlight. There is these classic pictures that are able to add in kind of thrills and intrigue, but also like depth and try to actually say something. And so Scoop is a well done movie. That's why it's get 3 stars. But when you compare it to those, it's lacking. And I think that's kind of the problem is when you go into this genre, you really got to realize that this is a genre that has a lot of weight and a lot of expectations, and you're going it's the same thing with, if you're going to do a gangster movie now, realize Goodfellas and Godfather are out there. So if you're going to try to make that style of movie, it's got to be really good. Otherwise, go in a different direction. And I felt this was trying to be that All President's Men and that Spotlight, and it wasn't quite there. And then another challenge, I think, which you sort of alluded to, is this movie suffers a bit in the fact that the actual interview is more interesting than this movie. That's kind of like the challenge. But all that said, it is an interesting movie. It is well directed. The guy who gave us The Forger did a well directed movie here. And I think you did mention one other kind of bit of a flaw here is when you take the time of like, let us know about Sam McAllister's home life, that gives you the idea, and when you spend that much time with her, that we are wanting to learn a bit about these characters. Like, okay, this is a movie letting us learn a bit about who Emily Maltis is and who these sort of people who are behind breaking the news here, who they really are. And it never actually does it. It's just little token things, a little bit of our home life here or there. And so I think that's where you're kind of coming from, was the idea that if you dared to go there, then you need to dig a bit more. You need to give us something, because I don't think I learned anything about any character here. Why I liked it, though, is I thought they did a good job of pacing the picture and in adding in thriller elements without there wasn't a car chase. There wasn't some undercover cabal. But when you got to the interview, you felt tension and you felt the two sides playing off each other, and the way that he did the fast cuts and the way that he sometimes did a bit of a slow-mo and focusing in on a face and then realizing, wait, the prince actually said that? He doesn't sweat? Oh, man, we are in trouble. Like, just those little bits I thought really were effective. And even though I knew how this thing turned out, in adding a little bit of thrills and being the tension. So lots of credit to the editing team and to the director here in kind of building that tension. That's what elevated the movie for me, is they did a great job. I do agree that I would have liked a little bit of balance between the two, because you did sense that you're supposed to know a bit more about Annette. You did sense that you're supposed to know a bit more of that side, and that felt like it was only given token stuff. And so if that's what they're going to do, they should have devoted more time to Sam McAllister so that her backstory stuff actually meant something. So some interesting choices, but I feel like I'm doing more criticisms for a movie I'm praising. And so I do want to say, great job with the tension. And like you said, great performances. Rufus Sewell was great as Prince Andrew. I thought he embodied it. He was believable. He came off pompous. He came off as a guy who was completely oblivious. And the little quirks that he put through, just this guy who you really are rooting against. So lots of points for Rufus Sewell there. Gillian Anderson did a really good job of capturing Emily and that interviewer. And so really good performances. This was a pleasant surprise, because I didn't really know what to expect going in based off the previous work of the director.
Yeah, that was the thing. It's when you look at, okay, so who's the director again? Oh, okay, we have talked about his work before, and this is like night and day difference. This is coherent storytelling, and we both, I think the reason both of us laid out our criticisms is because you're right. This comes from the line of movies like Spotlight and All the President's Men. We need to say, like, it's good, but it's not there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I felt that needed to be said about it. This is not that film. I think that this is it is riveting. Like I said, you watch it for entertainment. You don't watch it for fact. Like, I like what you said about Sam McAllister's character. It sort of finishes the thought I had, because I was upset that there was just cliche character elements about her life. And I realized that as you were talking, that my problem with that is because they never dug. It's just like, what are some surface things we can say in some dialogue? Okay, there we go. There's her character. And it was never fleshed out. And it was just, let's go with, so single mom, check. Trying to prove herself, check. Right? Certain things that didn't go anywhere, didn't lead to anything.
And that's the problem, is if you're going to introduce these cliche things, either go somewhere with it or you could have left them out.
Yeah. And I feel like it could have been left out because we didn't need to know anything outside of her work life. I really don't. And I mean, there are movies that just show us someone's work life, and that works really well. Like A Most Wanted Man. Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, we only ever see, it's never let's give him backstory.
Yeah.
And it works. So that sort of take can work, where we don't need to force something that doesn't belong in this story.
Yeah, no, Scoop is a movie that I do want to say, with all the criticisms, it's most definitely worth tracking down. One other thing I do want to mention is it does explore a little bit on what it's like to be in the female workplace, and also sort of the tension of what modern journalism is, because there's this idea that there was a lot of cuts that were being made, and a lot of people thought they wouldn't even have a job the next day, and then also sort of the females had something to prove. It was still sort of a male-dominant place. You got a little bit of that with the Emily character, and they don't explore it a lot, and I think it has been done much better in other movies, but it's at least worth mentioning. It's something they tried here, and it does work through the performances. Maybe not the script and the focus they do, but the performances from Billy Piper and Gillian Anderson, I think, conveyed the message well.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that stuff up.
So I mentioned that The Fall Guy was a little long. The next movie we're about to review was also a little long. It was about an hour and 40 minutes too long. And that is Woody the Woodpecker Goes to Camp, which also happens to be an hour and 40 minutes. My relationship with Woody Woodpecker is he existed on TV when I was a little kid. And when I was going into this movie, I thought, I like Woody Woodpecker, right? I watched his cartoons. And I realized I think he was one of those ones where I watched his cartoons because no other cartoons were on. It wasn't necessarily appointment television. It was more like, oh, there's no Looney Tunes right now. Oh, but there's Woody Woodpecker. Oh, and He-Man comes on after. All right, I'll watch Woody Woodpecker. And I was realizing that while watching this for the first 5 minutes, where I realized it's like Woody Woodpecker challenging every Nick Swarsten and Pauly Shore character ever when it comes to most annoying lead that you have to sit through? And the answer is yes. Woody Woodpecker is one of the most annoying people I have ever seen as a lead character in a picture. And that was at the first 5 minutes when he was going against some kind of like bro guy who has a YouTube channel and was trying to do camping. And that guy was annoying too. So it was 5 minutes of, I'm sickened by every character I see on here. I can't wait until they get to the likable characters. And the most likable character was the end credits. If you call the end credits a character, that was the most likable part because it meant I was done suffering this pain. I mean, there's kids in it, so I'm not going to say that the kids were unlikable. Am I going to say they had no personality or just kind of in the movie? Yes, I am going to say that. Basically, what happens is after Woody Woodpecker's attack with the bro YouTuber guy, he has to go to camp to learn to be a better person so that he could stay in the woods. So really thick and thoughtful storytelling there. So he goes to camp, and it's a STEAM camp, and I guess they do things at the camp. The movie's not quite really explaining that, but then we learn that the camp is divided, and there's like, I guess, a military camp and then a STEAM camp. But they're on the same camp property, and they're like cousins, the two people who run it. Mary Lou Parker is the STEAM camp one, and Joss Larson is the military one. And they have a yearly competition, and the military people always win because for some reason, even though the one is like a STEAM camp, they only do like military competition events. And so then there you go. On top of that, you've got yourself another villain. I believe this is like a sequel because there's another movie that I never seen. I did not bother to do my research and check to see if the two connect. But we find Buzzard, and I believe he is a bad guy from the original Woody Woodpecker cartoons. And he got out of jail. And he wants to own the camp so he can find I don't know why he has to own the camp in order to look for the buried treasure and why he just doesn't like look for the buried treasure. And as the story goes, he basically just starts looking for the buried treasure anyways before he owns the camp. But he comes up with the convoluted thing of like have these two camps compete for who owns the whole camp. And then he thinks that the military guys own the whole camp. Then he can look for the treasure. And even though it's still not his camp. And you're like, Chris, I don't understand the words you're saying. Well, I'm telling you what's in the movie. This is the plot that we're supposed to follow in this kid's movie. And you're like, well, maybe the sight gags and the great visuals will make up for the lack of the plot. Yeah, they do, because they make it even worse. As Woody Woodpecker continues to just destroy my eardrums and my head, Buzzard is not the least bit interesting. There's a walrus that's an inspector, and he's even less interesting. He's kind of sometimes supposed to be a bad guy, sometimes a hero. Everyone seems to just be kind of phoning this in. They're appreciating the paycheck they're getting. I mean, Mary Louise Parker is normally just delightful, and you can definitely tell that she can't wait for her coffee breaks. And this picture is just so flat. This is the Nick Swarsten school of irritation is supposed to be funny, and nothing is funny. This is one of those movies that you watch so that you realize, oh, Pixels was not as bad as I thought. I give this movie 1 star because it is a kids movie, and my daughter seemed to like it more than I did. So for that sake, it gets 1 star because at least I got to share some time with my kids.
Okay, so what about those without kids? Do you think they're going to
probably liked it less? No, they'll probably give it less.
I gave it half a star. I gave it half of a star. There's one person here, one person in this cast that felt like they were having a somewhat good time with this movie. And at least I found Josh Lawson as the director of Camp Hoorah. He was actually trying to have some personality and character into this movie. I'm now a Josh Lawson fan because he was in the movie Mortal Kombat, the 2021 version. He played Kano, and he was awesome in that. And just the fact, like, I'm not saying...
only awesome thing in that movie. Talk about bad movies.
There was okay things. I liked... I kind of liked Mortal Kombat.
Okay, well, we'll go back to Woody Woodpecker. Save that for another day.
Okay. I'm not saying he was good in Woody Woodpecker, but at least he was the only person trying to actually bring some charm and some charisma into this film. No one else was. I don't want to badmouth kid actors, but I will badmouth the casting people who chose them. I will badmouth the director who got dismal performances out of them. And you might be saying, well, Scott, so basically you're saying these kids weren't good. I didn't say that. However, if we were to stand back at an arm's length and you were to say just yes or no, was the acting from the kids good? Yes or no, no qualifying it. I would have to say no.
I would have to say hell no.
This was bad. This was really, I felt the exact same way as you. I hated Woody Woodpecker. You never want the audience to despise the main character. I despised him. And I know some people are going to be thinking this. I know some people are. They're going to be saying, but this is a family film. And guess what? Family films have made both of our #1 movie of the year before. Multiple times family films have been on our top 10 lists of the year before.
Has there ever been a year that we've done our best of that an anime movie has not made my list?
I don't think so. And the thing is, I always say, just because it's for kids or just because it's for families doesn't mean it has to be lazy. Doesn't mean it has to be poorly written. I should say there was another character in here that I kind of liked. There is a delivery guy that it's just all of a sudden he starts pulling fabric out of his mouth. And I'm like,
that's
what
the
the heck is happening?
That's the one star.
And he says, my dad said that if you do a magic trick, people will give you tips. And I'm like, okay.
I like
there
that.
we go. Yeah, there's something there that was good. I appreciate that. Nothing else. There's nothing else in this movie that I appreciated. I hated it. The amount of times I checked to see how much runtime was left was insane.
How is this an hour and 40 minutes?
Exactly.
This should have been like hour 15 max.
Bad idea. I give it half star. This will be talked about at the end of the year.
Yeah.
This is an awful, awful movie.
It's Christopher from July. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the reviews from Christopher and Scott from way back in May. And one of the problems with not doing a weekly movie breakdown in the last few months is we've got way behind on the summer box office challenge draft results. As we haven't kept track of the scores going on. So right now, I am going to give the updated look at to see who is doing what in the summer box office challenge. And let's just say, as of right now, it's looking like the summer box office challenge is not much of a challenge at all. It's looking like a big blowout, as one person is doing much better than the other person. But let's go over the picks right now, or at least the ones that have had their opening weekend, and look at which ones have had the best opening weekend so far, the opening weekend results. We'll start with Scott, and his number one pick, The Fall Guy, was a fantastic movie, but it was a disappointment for an opening weekend, especially as the big movie to kick off the summer season in May. It only ended up with 27,747,035. That was its opening weekend. It ended up having some decent legs because it's a great movie. And so it proved, despite even going to streaming really fast, or at least VOD really fast, it ended up proving some decent legs with people still going up to the theater to see it. But this is evidence, obviously, that Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling as themselves are not maybe super draws, even though Gosling's coming off of Barbie. The Fall Guy clearly doesn't have any kind of massive name recognition. I also think this is a sign that pictures that are sort of promoted as being about Hollywood just don't seem to do super well. Hollywood types like it, movie buffs like it, but as the average person, I think maybe this movie, the marketing did not really convey sort of the fun, romantic kind of adventure picture that it is. And so it ended up having a bit of a disappointing opening. And the disappointing openings continued for Scott. His number 2 pick, Furiosa, only ended up with 26,326,000 and 462,000 total for its opening weekend. And I think this is a sign of the fact that prequels don't always do great in the box office, and people weren't interested in a prequel. They wanted a continuation of the story. Not only that, but it's not Charlize Theron returning as Furiosa. It's now Anya Taylor-Joy who took over the role. And Anya Taylor-Joy is a super amazing actor. She is such a super talent. But I think for the most part, it just did not connect to people, because if they're like, if we are going to do a prequel, we want to see the actor that we are used to in that role. And so this was obviously a miscalculation and a big disappointment. Number 3, things got a little bit better for Scott. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Its opening weekend scored 58,400,000 and 788,000. But when you have sort of your first 2 not really delivering, that's not enough to really sort of help elevate Scott. But this is, I think it did better than he was expecting. But he needed sort of that picture that's getting closer to 100 million, which has not happened for him. His number 4 pick is If, Imaginary Friends. It did 33,715,800 and 100. Grand total for that one for an opening weekend. As a 4th pick, that's obviously a little bit on the low side, but this is also a summer where we don't have a lot of those tentpoles. And so we sort of were expecting that there's probably going to be a lot of lower grossing pictures here. His next pick after that, number 7, and I think Scott ended up being a little bit optimistic in the prospects of Maxine, which is the final picture, sort of that trilogy of the X trilogy. There was X, Pearl, and now Maxine's wrapping up the trilogy. Maxine didn't even come to theaters here in Brantford. And so it's more of an art house horror, limited release. And so he ended up with 6,705,038 is the dollars is for his opening weekend with Maxine. And definitely, I mean, 7th pick, it's you're expecting things lower, but I think this is probably even lower than what he was hoping out of that horror picture. But his biggest disappointment was his 8th pick. The Amy Winehouse biopic Back to Black only did 2,835,720 total dollars there for his opening weekend. And this was another one that ended up being limited release. And Amy Winehouse, I think, only has a certain amount of fans to begin with. I mean, I think she obviously was a star, but clearly not enough to make people necessarily want to see a movie about her. And again, it was limited release. This one didn't even come to Brantford either. And so this is a case of sort of, you gotta pay attention to the studios that are releasing movies. And the 10th pick for Scott, which has now also come out in theaters, is Bike Riders. And that ended up with 9,698,800,275. And that now puts them at a grand total of 165,429,119 is his grand total that he has, which with that many picks, with only 3 still to come, that is definitely on sort of the low side of the typical summer box office challenge. But again, we don't have as many big tentpoles this summer because of the strike, and a lot of sort of the bigger movies got pushed to another year. And so we're expecting things that maybe a bit on the lower side. But then we go to me, and this is where the blowout is happening. So my number 1 pick hasn't come out yet, Deadpool and Wolverine. But my number 2 pick, boy, did it deliver an Inside Out 2. It got 154,201,673 grand total, blowing out all of Scott's picks, and almost that movie alone is the amount of all his picks combined at this point. And so you can see why it's a big blowout. This obviously proves a few things. One, the Inside Out series means something to people. They want to return and see these characters again. It also shows that things were overblown when people were saying that Pixar has lost its magic. It's not a draw in the theater, because clearly this one did connect to people. I also think it shows that with COVID-19 hitting and with mental health being such a concern with kids, that a picture that is about sort of stress and anxiety and dealing with those emotions, it resonated with people. This is something that mattered to people, something that people were connecting with. And I do think that sort of tentpoles that are willing to deal with themes and issues that people are actually experiencing in their life, it's going to connect. It has that personal feel. It has that emotional connection. Sort of like, I think how Barbie last year was a big hit because of sort of, it was a fun blockbuster, but it also dealt with things that mattered to people. And so Inside Out 2 ended up being a huge opening weekend, and it's still becoming a huge hit. My number 3 pick was Despicable Me 4. And it did 75 million and 9,210. I'm not great at reading the numbers, as you can see. But yeah, this one did kind of where I was hoping. And so my anime movies definitely delivered for me 2 big hits. Again, those 2 movies alone blew out anything that Scott picked so far, and so it helped me get into the lead. My number 4 pick was Bad Boys 4 Ride or Die. It did 56,527,324. So that is, I'm happy with that. I had no clue where Bad Boys was going to land, where it would connect with people. Obviously, it's a series that people are still really into. And then I delivered another big one in number 5, A Quiet Place, Day 1. Gave me 53 million. Then we move on to the Garfield movie, which so far my first really low pick, and this is my final pick so far, and it was 24 million and 6,629. This puts me as a grand total of 362,744,836. And so, I mean, the reality is I have likely won this unless Twisters all of a sudden becomes a massive hit and all my other movies basically generate like $1 opening weekend. This ended up being a big blowout. The anime movies really helped me, and Bad Boys and Quiet Place proved to be series that are connecting with people a bit better than Furiosa or The Fall Guy did. It's interesting that A Quiet Place is a prequel too, but it did much better as a prequel than Furiosa did. And I think part of that, maybe the Quiet Place, the world itself, and trying to figure out how the aliens took over the world was more appealing to people. And the fact that it was sort of a horror picture when there isn't a lot of big, exciting horror pictures this summer made it connect more than something like Furiosa did. But there we go. That's the box office. That's the current state of it. It's looking like this one this summer is mine to win. And so after the streak ending last year, Scott winning for the first time, everything looks like it's back to normal. And after, the crazy year I've been through, it's nice to have something normal again. Me winning the summer box office challenge. And now that I have you, I also want to let you know all our usual information. Remember, you can contact us at themoviebreakdown@gmail.com or on Twitter at moviebreakdown1. We've also got Facebook at The Movie Breakdown. And you know what helps us? If you rate and subscribe to us. If you listen to us on Spreaker, Spotify, CastBox, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or where you listen to your podcasts, that it helps us in the algorithms if you rate or subscribe to us as well. Follow us on those and the social media we have. Please share and like us on social media. That also helps our exposure. And another way you can help us out is listen to us on the Spreaker app. As well, another area where you can help me is check out my website, Beyond the Balcony, if you like to read things. And I completely 100% confess that I haven't really been delivering when it comes to movie reviews or a lot of kind of pop culture pieces. I haven't dug into that as much as I should. It's been a lot of sort of just quick little pieces I've been putting up every day just to make sure there's something there. But the plan is to really rock this summer and have reviews on there. Get those punishment movies up on there for losing last year. I'm way behind on that. And so there is things you can read. Other things a few things that sort of I would love for you guys to check out. Way back in the beginning of June 7th was my 16th wedding anniversary. And so I write a few pieces on sort of my positive thoughts of what I've learned from 16 years of marriage. And so that's something that might be interesting to you. And then another thing I'd love for you to read on June 6th is I gave my final thoughts on my experience of Anastasia. I pay tribute and to some of the great casts I worked with there, but I also sort of talk about the experience of starring in a musical. That was my second one. I did Beauty and the Beast, and then this is Anastasia. It was a wonderful experience. You can read about that, as well as there's a bunch of pictures from the musical on there. And for those who care about sort of our theater journey, the Spicers Theater Journey, we are currently in a play now with Playful Fox, and that is Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe. I am Mr. Beaver. Emily is Mrs. Beaver. We are playing a married couple, so we're really stretching our dramatic chops there, our acting skills. But, I mean, we are playing beavers, which, as far as I know, I am not one. So that's a little bit of acting. And then there is a bunch of episodes of the Movie Breakdown that have not been posted, that are sort of waiting in the vault, which I think maybe when there is those weeks where something comes up, I'm going to use as a way to make sure that there is an episode every single week. There's a few sort of list episodes we did looking back at sort of our favorite movies of our childhood, our favorite action pictures from the 1980s. And those are things I'm going to kind of keep in the vault and then post snippets of those episodes or those entire episodes when something comes up during a week that maybe we're unable to record. I mean, we're hoping to record something new every single week. We want to get back in the routine of an episode every single week, but there is some stuff that will hopefully stop there from being a period where you have to wait several weeks to listen to an episode again. So that's the game plan. We want to get back to having a podcast, an episode of the movie breakdown coming every Wednesday like it used to be. And the next episode that's coming, we're going to, for the next little bit, return to something we did, I think it was back in 2020. And that was the sort of solo movie deep dives, where we do a podcast and devote it entirely to one movie. That was something we did for a little bit. We may return to the format of, reviewing several movies in an episode eventually, but for right now, just for different reasons, it works better for us to kind of focus on one movie. And the first movie that gets that honor is going to be Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. It's a horrible name, but both me and Scott have a lot of affection for the Beverly Hills Cop series, and so we're hoping that this long-awaited, several decade absence and now the big return of Axel Foley, that this is a fun one to talk about. We will dive into that picture and sort of talk about the history of the picture that really turned Eddie Murphy into a movie star. So we'll talk a little bit about the whole series while focusing on the latest picture. So that will be coming up this Wednesday as we get back into the movie breakdown routine. So look forward to that one. Thank you so much for listening to this little bit different episode. On behalf of Scott Martin, I'll say thank you for listening. Scott doesn't sound like that at all. But on behalf of Scott Martin, on behalf of myself, thank you so much for listening to the movie breakdown. Scott Martin talked. I'm Scott Martin. And I'm Christopher Spicer. Thank you so much, and have a great week at the movies.